Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about the recent controversy with the folk singer Buffy Sainte-Marie. Okay, she has presented herself as, I guess, a full-blooded American Indian, Canadian Indian, and it turns out that, it looks pretty clear that she actually is the daughter of an Italian American or an Italian immigrant and a white American mother. Okay, so, I mean, clearly there is some kind of dishonesty. There's some kind of, presenting herself as something other than what she really is. And this reminds me a lot of the controversy we had with Rachel Dolezal. Okay, if we'll remember, Rachel Dolezal was born like, I don't know, she was born like in Montana or somewhere in the Northwest, and she's a completely white person. Okay, but she did grow up with I think stepbrothers or stepsisters. I think stepbrothers who were black. The family did adopt black people. So from a very young age, Rachel Dolezal did have a lot of, I guess, affection for black people, and also had siblings that were black. And by the time she was, I think, a senior in high school, she had decided she wanted to go to Howard University, which is actually a black university. So that was kind of a big deal. And so I think from very early on, Rachel Dolezal, expressed an honest identification with Black culture and really wanting to participate as, I guess, a Black person. So at some point, I think she really, went through some sort of transformation. And we can argue whether this is a cultural appropriation or whether it's just a person who just feels like they feel at home in a different culture and they want to, sort of assimilate, and maybe take on some of the beauty that they find. And so I would like to address this issue because I think this is kind of what happened with Buffy Sainte-Marie. Okay, it looks like Buffy Sainte-Marie finished college. She was very intelligent, by the way. She graduated, I think, with a degree in philosophy or something kind of like that, something kind of like liberal arts, but, like near the top of her class, and ended up traveling to Canada, where she stayed with, I guess she stayed like on an Indian reservation or with American Indian people. And she really came to feel an identification. Um, Now, on top of that, I can't help but say that, despite her ancestry, Buffy Sainte-Marie seems to have physical features that sort of look kind of, Native American. So I guess I struggle trying to find the problem really here, because I think, there are some people who will completely falsify their identity, and it's really just in the spirit of a fraud. Okay, where they'll completely falsify their an identity for, just the purpose of just fooling people and getting some kind of benefit. Now, I realize that Buffy Sainte-Marie did create an artistic persona for herself as an American Indian, and I know that did benefit her. But I just think that the fundamental motivation for Buffy Sainte-Marie, I think the fundamental motivation is, I think she honestly just felt identified with these people. And even though there's some deception and some dishonesty in there, I think the truth of the matter, the actual truth, is that I think she felt identified with these people. And so, she may have engaged in a little bit of deception, but in her heart, I think she really felt like she was part of these people, and she felt a real solidarity. And I think that even though she did, gain something as an artist, I think the purpose of her art was to benefit those people, to bring, positive awareness to American Indians or indigenous or native, however you want to say it. And so, I think, to be quite honest, I think it was in good faith, and I think you can have dishonesty in good faith, because I think deep in her heart, I think she just really identified, and I think people should be allowed to identify with others. And I don't think we need to be that nitpicky, unless a person is just purely committing fraud with bad faith, okay, and has no intent to benefit those people and is just only doing it for themselves. And I think in this case, I see something. I see a spirit of wanting to help these people and wanting to raise positive awareness. Okay, and I think the same thing is true for Rachel Dolezal. I never understood why people were so upset, even though there is some falsification, even though Rachel Dolezal was presenting herself kind of with a black appearance, or not really. I mean, I didn't buy it. I thought she looked white, even when she was supposedly, carrying herself as a black person. But she sort of made an effort to make her hair more curly and to just sort of maybe, I don't know what she did with her skin tone, but she did maybe use some kind of cosmetics to make herself look a little darker, I think. And so, you could say, well, this is just falsifying, this is just fraud. But I think if you really look at Rachel Dolezal's history, okay, I think she had an honest, good faith intent going back from prior to her college days, where I think she really wanted to be part of the black community. And I think she wanted to actually assimilate into the black community. And that was something that she felt. And I think in the end, I think you have to look at the intent. And I think the intent for Rachel wasn't to fake being black just so she could get jobs in academia and maybe get to the top of the NAACP. I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent was to be part of the black community. And then at some point, I think she wanted to be a leader in the academics, in the world of, like, say, Black history. No, I'm sorry, in the world of Black studies, African studies, in the world of social sciences, right? And so I think she honestly felt identified with the Black community, and I think she honestly felt called to work as a academic in some area of social science around Black studies. So I don't know. Like I think we have to look at people's intent, and I think if you can see there's good faith, and if it's an honest identification, then I think you can forgive a little bit of minor dishonesties, about, maybe her just feeling, maybe her just wrestling with having to say, yes, I'm white, but I identify. Maybe she felt as though people should have the right to sort of kind of transform, I guess, and I think we need to be open-minded to that, because I don't think it came out of just pure fraud. It wasn't like, oh, screw these black people. I'm gonna do this because it's gonna benefit me. I think she really wanted to be part of the black community, wanted to support the black community, and wanted to raise up positive awareness for the black community. So I have a lot of trouble. I've never been able to see anything really terrible about Rachel Dolezal. Even though, you can argue, I've seen some documentaries about Rachel Dolezal, and I can see that she's a little bit narcissistic. She is a little bit narcissistic. She really over dominates, her children, and she has this very dominating kind of a little bit self-centered presence. However, I don't want to get into how clinical or subclinical it is. And there's a lot of sort of narcissistic people in the world. And you have to look at someone's overall personality. And I think the overall personality, I think there's a lot of good qualities to Rachel Dolezal. And I don't think that I don't think the punishment that she's received in losing her entire career and just having so much stigma in public, which has really cost her a lot. I mean, she's had to almost live really kind of in poverty. And so I think that the price she's had to pay, I think, is not really commensurate with whatever small peccadillos that she's responsible for in terms of minor dishonesty. So that's just my opinion. I don't have this big hang up about cultural appropriation. I think it depends on the intent. If somebody is just like, oh, screw you guys, they have no care, no concern for that community, and all they're doing is just robbing the appearance of that community just purely for their personal benefit, well, that's one thing. And that maybe should be considered a cultural appropriation or misappropriation. But just being honestly identified and honestly wanting to belong to a culture, I'm sorry, I think I just can't see the terrible crime in that. And, black people will say, well, but she's really white, so she maintains the privileges of being white while also borrowing ours. I think that's unfortunate, but that's also nitpicking, because I think in her heart, I think she cares about the black community. And I think she wants to identify honestly as being part of the black community. And that's in her heart. And she really wants to assimilate. And I don't see why we should be so righteous, so nitpicky. I mean, what kind of people are we that we're going to find problem with that? I mean, when someone honestly wants to identify and be part of, and she raises black children. So I don't know. I mean, do we really want to be that nitpicky? I don't see it. I can't find in myself to be that nitpicky. So I guess the final topic here then is I want to look at maybe the narcissism in society. How are we becoming so righteous, so nitpicky and righteous? Okay, that we want to enter into this just minute sort of nitpicking of just minor dishonesties, when the overall picture of a person may be that they have a lot of goodness and they have a lot of good faith in wanting to, identify with it and even raise up some aspect of, some subculture or some minority culture. You know, are we, what does it mean for us to become so high, so like focused and nitpicky? I guess nitpicky, righteous nitpickiness, right? Um, to me, that is in the narcissistic spectrum, because to me, narcissism is when basically you let certain shiny objects over occupy your consciousness, right? So the typical shiny object for people who are narcissistic is things that tend to raise oneself up and tend to relatively diminish other people. That's just kind of the basic shiny object, and so whatever tends to put me in a more positive or higher, more important light, and tends to relatively diminish other people, well, that's going to be the shiny object that kind of floods people who have narcissistic issues, right? But there are other things that are kind of related to that. This idea of getting too flooded with one shiny object, and I think what we're seeing a lot of, I think, in just the, I would say, political correct, woke political correct culture, is just we're getting too flooded with this shiny object of, oh, this guy did a small thing dishonest, or this is a slight disrespect or whatever. But when you get into a place where you're getting overly stimulated by identifying small errors or small dishonesties or small disrespect, from other people, I think that kind of takes us out of the normal balance. I think, I personally think we need to be very careful. I enjoyed living in the 1970s. Okay, I grew up in the 1970s, and one of the things I liked about the 1970s is we were sort of coming out of an era, let's say a more prudish era from, like, say, the 1940s and 50s, where people were maybe a little bit too righteous and moral, maybe a little bit too rigid, and that, in the 60s and 70s, people were discovering a little more flexibility, not to be so rigid and perfect and punctilious and whatever. And so I think there is a wisdom in maybe not being too goody two shoes. You know what I mean? There is something even a little bit, I think, a little suspicious and maybe even a little pathological, maybe a little bit not good about being too nitpicky goody two shoes, where we hold such a high righteous standard of moral perfection, for everybody. And I think there is kind of sort of a middle ground where we can sort of relax the standards, where there is room for people to be maybe just a little bit dishonest, but it's not a big deal because you look at the overall picture, and it may be that in the overall picture, it's not always a case of bad faith, right? And so I'm kind of one of those people where I think it's more mature of us. I think it's less narcissistic of us as a public to not get so overflooded by identifying minor errors or minor potential disrespect or whatever, and to look at the bigger picture and just to be a little more flexible and understanding. I think that requires a little more maturity. And I think if we all want to be a little less narcissistic, I think we're going to try to avoid letting any shiny object, whether it's a moralistic, whether it's something personally gratifying, but just not letting any shiny object overflood our attention and dominate our better judgment. And that really, before we jump on people and want to like unleash like major punishments on people, you know, or sort of rise up like a cultural mob against people, which is very destructive. We may just want to, before we pull the trigger on the nuclear option, let's say, we may just want to sit in our stomach for a while and just kind of look over that person's the overall, let's say, the totality of that person's life, and just kind of really examine whether it's really a case of bad faith. Okay. And I think in the case of Buffy Sainte-Marie and also in the case of Rachel Dolezal, I don't see the bad faith. Okay. And so, if we are going to be as a culture less narcissistic, I think we need to be very careful not to get too hung up on this goody two shoes, moral perfection, being too righteous, to this high level of, like moral standards. And that we need to learn to, discover the aesthetic beauty of maybe relaxing moral standards to a reasonable level, and not being so caught up in minor infractions or minor dishonesties, and to always remain cognizant of the overall circumstances of a person and the basic at the bottom, basic level of whether that person has good faith, and if a person has even moderately good faith, not to be so hung up on the minor little errors they may be committing, or even, let's say, eccentric behavior, because in the end, here's another thing too. This is the final thing. you know I think one of the best signs of mental health, and one of the best signs of, like, say, a high level of evolution, is the human appreciation for the absurd and even the ridiculous. Okay, how there's something delightful, and I think there's something even, maybe even philosophical, about, like, say, the silliness and the funniness, of things that are either absurd or even off the charts ridiculous, because that is part, I think the absurd and the ridiculous are part of what I would think of the flamboyance of human joy. Okay. And the flamboyance of human joy is like the feathers and the plumage, of happy people, the peacock plumage and everything. And it is good to have a lot of colors and feathers and weird stuff, and part of that is allowing the joy of eccentricity, the joy of things that are absurd, the joy of things that are even ridiculous, because it's fun. It's even funny, and I think people should be allowed to sometimes go off the charts, because it's like, what the hell is that? It's like, it's almost more funny and amusing than it is really problematic, So if you have some white person who, for whatever reason, just believes they're black, and they're like the president of the NAACP in Spokane, I think it's even kind of funny. I think there's even something kind of amusing and something kind of absurd about it, but in a cool way. It's sort of like, we need more of that. That's like a vitamin that I think we're underestimating. The vitamin of the absurd and even the ridiculous. So I really worry about a culture that gets so rigid. We get so rigid that we can't even tolerate, the enjoyment and the delight of things that are a little off the charts weird and even absurd and ridiculous. Like, what's wrong with us? That's part of the color. That's part of what makes life interesting. And so I'm a little disappointed that we had to destroy the life of Rachel Dolezal, and that now we're considering this massive, assault, this like public assault on the dignity of Buffy Sainte-Marie, who in the end was a very intelligent, very caring, very empathetic person who really just identified with American Indians and just wanted to raise up consciousness in favor of those people. So I just don't see, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. I just don't see the real problem, So like Buffy Sainte-Marie, people like Rachel Dolezal, those potentially could be people that give color and the kaleidoscope, glory to our human existence, despite their small peccadillos of dishonesty. Let's not forget that Bob Dylan was very dishonest about his origins too, but nobody made a big stink out of it, So anyway, just a reminder that we need strange people. We need the ridiculous. We need the absurd. And I don't see any bad faith on the part of Buffy Sainte-Marie or Rachel Dolezal. So, I don't know. I encourage people maybe to lighten up, right, and not be so uptight. Anyway, appreciate that, and thanks for watching.